Welcome everybody. It's February 15th, 2022. And my name is Fiona Lyon. I am on the Urban Design Panel's Executive Committee. And today, actually, I'll be introducing our colleagues, Cassie Ballou and Laura Lillard and Jim Frederickson.
Urban Design Panel Zoom meeting thing.
Could Matt Laird mute his microphone, please? Everybody mute, please.
Yeah, maybe I'll move my mute reminder up. Folks don't mind just muting when they automatically join. That would be wonderful. And lastly, Joan Frederickson, and they're all from the city of Portland with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So welcome. And the panel discussion today is the West Portland Town Center. They'll be focusing on the character statement that they've been working on. And just a reminder, the Urban Design Panel, or the UDP, is sponsored jointly by the American Institute of Architects, the American Planning Association, and the American Society of Landscape Architects. And it's composed of professionals from those three organizations with a shared interest in urban design. The AIA has previously hosted the event at the Center for Architecture in Portland, and now generously offers this monthly Zoom meeting until further notice. In addition to a monthly email announcement, our panel presentations can be found on the AIA Oregon event calendar, as well as their weekly Thursdays at 3 newsletter. Participation in any event makes you a panel member. We encourage you to sign up for information about future presentations. When you register for any UDP presentations, you'll be included in the upcoming invitations and future events. And we encourage you to send any interesting future panel presentations or ideas to Adrian Morris at AIA Oregon. Adrian's email is amorris@aia-oregon.org, and I'll throw that in the chat. Just a reminder, these presentations are recorded and they'll be made available by the AIA as a Vimeo file that can be found in the link that I will add to the chat box. So we've got about a 30-minute presentation. Cassie, you got plenty of time. And we'll be followed by a Q&A session. For the Q&A, please pose your questions and comments in the chat box. Jeremy has kindly offered to moderate the chat today, and any follow-up questions after this afternoon can be sent directly to today's presenters via their email that we'll add in the chat. One last reminder, if you're joining, please do remember to mute yourself. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Cassie, if you want to take it away.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us here and for your interest in the West Portland Town Center project. We're happy to be here and share the work we're doing on the character statement. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that'll work. Let's check it out. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Great. Hey. I'm going to close the chat for now, but let me know if something urgent comes up. All right, so we're going to talk about the character statement for West Portland Town Center today. And I'm Cassie Ballou, as Fiona said, from the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, the city planner there. And with me today is Joan Frederickson, who is the project manager for the West Portland Town Center project plan, and my Urban Design Studio colleague Laura Lillard's also here. And you may remember she led the work and creation of the newly adopted Citywide Design Guidelines. So our agenda today is going to focus on a summary of both the West Portland Town Center project plan and the character statement. The summary of the project plan is going to be brief. It's going to include some details pertaining to mainly the character statement and how it supports the character statement is supported by the plan, vice versa. For any of the finer grained details of the plan, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Actually, I'll do that after I share. I'm not sure. Oh, here it is. I'll do that now. And then anyone who is eager can, that That link has information about the current proposed draft and also some contact info for our team should you have additional questions. And then the summary of the character statement itself, we're going to talk a little bit about the process and outreach we've done over the past 2 years. And then we'll go over the next steps in the project where we're headed. So first, to touch on process a bit, the plan has been through a number of Planning and Sustainability Commission, as well as Design Commission meetings since the proposed draft was released last September 2021. And the most recent work session was on February 8th, where we reviewed a number of amendment topics. And there's a subsequent work session proposed or slated for March 8th, where we're going to continue to review these amendment topics and looking to get more direction on how the PSU would like to see the plan refined or amended. We're expecting at least one additional work session along with a recommendation in hopefully late March or April. And then the proposal could be at City Council by late summer, early fall, really depending on the schedule that's before us. So the West Portland Town Center is located in outer Southwest Portland, where the red arrow here is. Many of you may be familiar. It's one of the 9 town centers in the city. It was designated as a town center around the mid-90s as part of the 2040 Metro Plan. And it was reaffirmed during the city's more recent 2035 comp plan. And it's currently one of 2 centers without a plan in the city. You may also be familiar with this area in the context of the recent efforts to build a light rail along Barber Boulevard. As part of the Southwest Corridor project. BPS is still continuing the town center planning work despite the measure failing in 2020, because we consider it an important effort since the light rail, even though it's not coming in the short term, is still needed in the corridor and expected in the future to serve employment and residential growth in Southwest Portland and Washington County. The planning is needed to address this growth and to realize the center's potential as a vibrant, inclusive, and people-oriented center. It is a high opportunity area with some of the highest performing schools, great parks, open spaces, civic amenities, and a close commute to many colleges and to regional job centers. And our existing policies, they call for more people in the future to have access to housing and jobs in these areas. And so we want to plan for that. This is also an opportunity to address some of the exclusive zoning practices that were missed when the Southwest Community Plan was done in 2000. And this plan made a few changes to the town center and left Barber virtually untouched. So this is an opportunity to remedy some of those missed opportunities. So zooming in a bit more, this map shows the study area of the plan. Barber Boulevard is highlighted in orange, as is the Barber Transit Center area. The town center is an area with diverse populations and civic services. And the work of this plan builds off the analysis and community relationships coming out of the Southwest Equitable Housing Strategy. And through that process, we learned that this is the most racially and economically diverse area in Southwest Portland. And the community wants to support and grow that existing diversity as it receives new investments and then try to avoid the displacement that can come with being a more desirable place. So to achieve this transformative change, the plan has 2 shared visions, one for strong people and communities, and another for great places with equitable access. There are 9 goals stemming from these 2 visions and supporting them. They are outlined or shown on the right of the slide here and include just designing with nature,
in cost, but is it
providing new housing choices, and then some elements to help with displacement prevention, opportunities for inclusive engagement, providing more active transportation choices, just to name a few. The plan proposes achieving these goals through supporting actions by both the public and nonprofit sectors, supporting and strengthening new and existing partnerships with community and other organizations in the area, the creation of a new plan district in the zoning code to support future growth, and then along with that, zoning and comprehensive plan map changes as well. There's also several recommended transportation and stormwater improvements proposed, and then a coordinated growth strategy to help plan for the short-term and long-term growth of the town center. So many people and many of you, when you think about the West Portland Town Center, might envision this area, which is known as the Crossroads. And if you do, you know that it's the intersection of Southwest Barber here in orange, Southwest Capitol Highway, which is this avenue or highway here, and then I-5 running north or east-west. This intersection is in the heart of the town center, and it divides it into 3 distinct geographies: central, or the Crossroads area, and then the area north of Barber Boulevard and the area south of Barber Boulevard. These areas are really unique in character, and even their demographic makeup, as we saw in the image earlier. The plans for, and then just as a reminder, the plans for the Southwest Quarter Light Rail project, we're going to go along Barber Boulevard here. So kind of just imagining what that change would be if the light rail, when it does come to fruition in the future. So the project plan does hope to shift this conversation and change the vision for the area. This bird's eye view provides a 20-year possible build out of the town center and includes some of the physical elements of the plan, including a revitalized and pedestrian-friendly Barber Boulevard, seen here in pink, the creation of binodal commercial center north of Barber, here along Collins, and then and also south of Barber on Capitol Highway. There's a multicultural hub centered on the Barber Transit Center site here in orange. There's plans for expanded housing and commercial opportunities north and south of the central area beyond Barber and Capitol corridors. And then a green ring, which many of you may be familiar with, a low stress ped bike friendly circulation network in and around the town center. So that's proposed to kind of go along the outside of the Crossroads, linking north and south. The plan also includes the expansion of design overlay zone to ensure that the growth in the center aligns with the goals and policies set out in the 2035 comp plan. And as part of that expansion, the area is receiving a character statement to guide design reviews and developing the area as the community has envisioned. And so with that, I'm going to move on to talk a bit about the character statement piece. And to start, I'm just going to recap for those who may not know what character statements are. They are a new tool that were developed as part of the newly adopted Citywide Design Guidelines. This area, the West Portland Town Center, is the second to get one. And the first was the McAdam Plan District, which I think we spoke to you all about a couple of years ago now. These statements apply within all centers and corridors that have the design overlay. They're created or developed in partnership with local community. And then the purpose is, one, to describe a brief history of the area and local character, and also to provide guidance on how development should address an area's character defining features. And we've kind of divided that into looking at community, architecture and urban design, and nature. So each statement will follow a general framework composed of 6 pieces that give it some background and context for that specific area. These 6 sections outlined here include a title just to give users a general idea where it applies in the designated area, a diagrammatic map that is supposed to align with the text and help illustrate some of the ideas there. A background section that includes a brief history of the area, kind of illustrating how it's created the current context, and then also a little bit about the current policy framework that's being developed, which we've tried to incorporate quotes highlighting community voices. There's a photo for each character section just to illustrate the context or design approach. And then the character sections themselves are meant to highlight the area's distinctive qualities and the ways that development should address them. And as you may already know, this is the current proposed draft of the statement in the West Portland Town Center, and it follows that same framework. And the content for this statement has been derived from collaboration and conversations with the West Portland Town Center communities over the past 2 years, and most recently the PSC and Design Commission. So for this project, for the character statement, specifically, we've done a series of 4 major outreach efforts over the past 2 years. And this image is from our first event in March of 2020, one of our last in-person open houses. We brought a specific question, kind of put this butcher paper up on the wall, brought in this question about what characteristics and features should future development reflect in the West Portland Town Center. And then we asked people to come and answer the question. We provided Post-its, markers, stickers, a series of photos, both from within the Southwest District and outside for inspiration, and then asked people to just tell us what they thought. And so we got numerous responses, and we took this butcher paper back to our studio, and we tried to divide the responses we got into these 3 categories of architecture, community, and nature. And most of them we found aligned with these sections. Not all, you know, there's some that were kind of in between the Venn diagram, but we used that to find some main themes, and then took that those themes to try and create an outline for the character statement, which later created our first draft, the discussion draft that was released in the fall of 2020. Our second piece of outreach that we did was the community survey that went out with the discussion draft in the November of 2020. In that, we provided 2 questions just to gather some more information about the characters, some more content for the character statement, more specific content. So the 2 questions we asked are here. One was, are there any special landmarks or places in the community that should be recognized for future development? So just trying to get an idea of what areas and places were important. And then looking at also what features or materials or spaces should future development incorporate to foster diversity and inclusivity. So getting a little bit more nuanced in that question. From this, the survey as a whole got around 70 responses. And then for us, we saw a couple of overarching themes that folks wanted to hear or see in the character statement. Namely, they wanted to see better connections to some of the community landmarks. And they wanted to see more family-oriented, inclusive gathering spaces, more representation of the multicultural community through various means, artwork, public spaces, architecture. We also heard a lot of support for publicly accessible spaces that had views of Mount Hood, and they really wanted development to better respond to topography to increase accessibility. And then also just this area is rich in its green tree canopy and green spaces, and they want to build off that and improve it. The third piece of outreach that we did was our most recent, back in December, well, our most recent focus group was in December of last year. And this was to gather more specific content for the character statement from the area's immigrant communities. And it came out of conversations with both the commissions who wanted to hear more from these communities. So it was great to get support to do that extra bit of outreach. We co-hosted the event with Hockey Community Organization at their headquarters in Southwest Portland. We had about 15 members of the East African community there, various age ranges, which was great. We had Hockey help provide interpretation in Swahili, just to ensure that everyone was able to contribute. And the conversation was organized around the 5 most common themes that we heard during our community engagement. This ended up being street activation, open space, public art, water features, and multicultural design. And then just to give you guys an idea of the images we showed for each of the themes, we tried to choose some inspirational images and then had a prompting question or observation for each. We showed them a lot of images and we got some great responses. So they were asked to share their observations and their desires for the future development of the center. And then these were the most popular or positively received images for each of those topics that we discussed. And just to touch on one of them, for example, the multicultural design, on that we had a big point of discussion, just trying to understand what everyone imagined when they heard the words multicultural design. The responses we heard didn't really focus so much on like an architectural style or elements necessarily, but more on how spaces should be designed for communal and multi-generational gathering, just to help maintain community and cultural connections that were really important to this particular community. The image of the outdoor plaza here that's shown, we got a lot of positive responses from this, and we think or believe that it's because it had excuse me, numerous outdoor covered areas, and as well as a lot of family-friendly elements like this water feature, some low-rise seating, and then lots of open space for multiple large events, and then particularly prayer. Having space for that was really important too. So overall, this focus group we felt was a great opportunity to hear from the community on a deeper level on some of these issues, and we're hoping to use it as a template for future character statement work and other areas. And so before I leave this slide, I'll just touch on the 4th bit of outreach we've done, which has been meeting and collaborating with the city's tribal liaison office just to discuss how to revise the language on Indigenous peoples that we've written within the document. We want to better acknowledge and celebrate this community and its history in the area. So we've been working with that office to just improve the language we've used. So finally, getting to the content of the statement, this feedback and outreach we've done over the past couple of years is still ongoing, and it's helped strengthen how we approach the document, particularly the background and policy sections, because we're not only looking at the area's physical and historic context, but also making sure to acknowledge its social context as well. For example, we've been working to better acknowledge the area's diverse communities, specifically the Islamic and Indigenous communities in the area, and also provide a brief history of the development along Barber Boulevard and the crossroads, and then how that has impacted connectivity in the area. And then also highlighting the existing conditions and how they may relate to emerging character, kind of connecting the dots for the character sections later on. We also included a current policy framework section, and this highlights the current and future project goals for the area, mainly kind of tying connecting the dots around health equity and connectivity that are mentioned quite a bit in the character sections. And then finally, we've also provided an additional resources section with the goal of providing guidance for document users who, both city staff and design professionals who will be using it in the future. So getting onto the character sections themselves, we've been revising them with the commissions just to address what we've heard at the focus group and at some of the commission sessions last fall. We've been workshopping some of the language with Design Commission. And so as I go through each of the 3 community character sections, we'll pose a question for you all at the bottom. and we can come back to these at the end of the presentation, but just wanted to kind of prompt you with some questions to think about, things that we've struggled a bit with as we've gone through this project. So under this community character section, this language at the top is what's currently in the proposed draft. And it currently highlights the area's multicultural community and how development can support it. It also encourages the preservation of community landmarks. And as we've heard, is not as nuanced as we need it to be. So some ways we've tried to change the course a bit is having the language focus more on being place specific, and also on supporting and strengthening the existing community using the information we got from the focus group last December. So for example, this bullet in the red box here talks about creating public spaces in the town center, but it's not very nuanced. So we're looking at trying to break that apart, tease out, what do spaces look like in different parts of the town center? For instance, some of the ways we're looking at this is we want larger, more flexible, multifunctional plazas in the multicultural hub, while maybe more intimate courtyard spaces within sites along some of the more the main streets north and south of the crossroads, like Southwest Collins and Huber, and maybe Southwest Capitol. So one thing we were asking you to consider as we kind of go through this as a question is what resources or information would you find helpful when designing with and for this community or any community as you're going through your projects? We're kind of interested to know what tools or resources would be helpful to have. So moving on to the architecture and urban design character section, the current language, again at the top here, focuses on improving the area's autocentric public realm through area-specific design responses and supporting the desire for more welcoming and people-centered public spaces, including multicultural gathering spaces. And so this section was revised just to clarify what area-specific design responses are, like what we're trying to get at there, and also highlighting the need to create a more welcoming public realm on streets, particularly Barber Boulevard. So the revised language is looking to be more place-specific, so describing the three geographies that we've talked about earlier. The central area, the crossroads, north of Barber, south of Barber, in the intro statement, and then tailoring the guidance within the rest of that section to respond to and connect those three geographies and just be more nuanced in the direction. And the question we'd like to pose here and are curious to hear from you about is, what contextual features would you respond to when designing in an area that's transitioning away from auto-dominant character? And there's a lot of these areas in Portland, as you know, and we'll probably be revisiting this question over and over again. So it'd be interesting to hear what tools you have used or you would respond to when designing in a community like this. And finally, the natural and scenic resources section, the current language in this section, this is the one we've changed, not as robust changes are coming to this section, but we've been building on this one, building on the area's existing system of green spaces. So focusing on creating a series of tree line connections within the district, just kind of, tying those, strengthening those connections. We're also looking at improving the area's health and ecological issues, like the urban heat island impact in this area, and also the health of some of the natural features like the Trine and Fennel watersheds and the habitat areas. And then also looking at the existing language also talks about ensuring that future development responds to the unique topography of the area. So to improve this section, one of the things we're doing is being more specific about what resources to strengthen connections to. or reference in this section. So for instance, in this red box here, we talk a lot about strengthening visual and physical connections to resources, but we don't really explicitly name the resources. So we're looking to add a little bit more nuance and detail in there to be more helpful. And then another thing we're looking at doing is providing more detail on how development should respond to some of these green elements that are mentioned in the plan, like the green ring and the greenscape facilities. We're going to do that by providing more detail within the architecture and urban design section that just provides more detail on how development should respond to those and what they are, kind of illustrate, better explaining what those elements are as well. So the question we had for this section is, are there resources or features that you think should be addressed in this revision? Looking at the natural and scenic resources of this area, is there anything that we're missing? Those of you that are familiar with the area, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then finally, just wanted to quickly touch on next steps and close by talking about our process with the character statement, where it's headed. The Design Commission, our last work session, we're expecting to be on March 3rd, where we're going to review the final draft and ask the commission to make a recommendation. And then we're expecting a PSC recommended draft by spring, summer this year. And then by late summer, fall, like I said earlier, looking to be at City Council. So we're hoping that's the trajectory we're headed for. But we've learned things change quite quickly in this environment. So with that, I'm going to stop and thank you for listening. I know that was a long presentation, but I'd love to hear comments and questions from you all. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Cassie. There's a couple questions in the comment. I encourage you to collect your questions there and add them in there so that we can keep a sort of dialogue going. But David, you had one that first asked, the site has a big highway presence in its middle, right there at the intersection. Are there unique and or innovative streetscape landscape opportunities to include in nature, capital nature, as desired by the community? Are they unique? So I think you were touching a little bit on that, Cassie, on that last slide that we had up there about the natural resources and scenic resources slide.
Yeah, let me think on that for just a second.
Certainly. I would just say that that's where my mind was going. I full disclosure, among some of the people in the room, we spent a fair amount of time on Southwest Corridor studying this. In fact, one of the earliest options we looked at was one of the alignments along Collins way back when. And what was struck me as really interesting is those views you do get of Mount Hood that are so specific to that place that you don't get in that same framework. So that's important. I know. And they're surprising at times, unless you know the place and or have spent time there, you don't always know that that's that moment in some places that you can get to it. But I also think that, let's see, I think the Memorial Natural Woods, there's definitely a green verdant aspect to it, really compromised by a warp and weft of vehicular arterials that just intersect that moment. So it's an interesting sort of push and pull between those two, with that, again, with the cross slope that happens through there in terms of the community itself, the higher and lower sort of steps of the north and south. Just some commentary on that.
Yeah, no, I think you're highlighting a lot of the points that we struggled with on how to weave. We have like a pretty well-defined north and south, and it's kind of like how do we connect those. So I like the idea of looking more closely at how to be more innovative in that center.
Yeah, I did have more. There was another chat in here. Let's see, a comment, of course, on the Barber Boulevard, what was it? The market there. Barber Boulevard's Foods is a great neighborhood market with lots of international foods. It's located at a crazy intersection, as we're talking about, at Capitol Barber and Taylor's Ferry and I-5. Two questions. Start with the one. It would be difficult to add denser development on this corner without impacting traffic. What transportation improvements would facilitate denser development in the area? So one is about how can we improve, I guess, the transportation in that area to help facilitate the denser development, I suppose.
That's a
Yeah,
great
I guess-
question. Joan, you wanna, I'm gonna let
I'll
Joan
take-
jump on. Yeah.
I'll take that one. Hi everybody, Joan Frederickson again, with the plan project. That's a great question, and I think the transportation piece of this puzzle is a huge one, and it's certainly something that's still evolving. We obviously would love to just wave our wand and make the crossroads better, or take out the on-ramps, or make any number of improvements to that intersection, but we don't have the ability to do that right off. And so we do have in the plan identified a number of future projects that need to be done to really see this place come to fruition in terms of a welcoming, vibrant center, and moving away from sort of the auto dominant situation that they're now. Specifically to that intersection, so we will be addressing in the plan, we will be looking at obviously traffic volumes and all that type of thing, and if there is mitigation needed in terms of transportation volume impacts and all that, we will be laying that out in the plan. But we do have specifically called out sort of a phase 1 and a phase 2 plan improvement plan for that intersection. So one would be sort of a nearer term, sorry, my words are escaping me, sort of low, Cassie, why I'm not remembering the words, a sort of intermediary kind of initial plan for doing some sort of less engineered, but
Interim,
more.
the interim.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Interim improvements for the crossroads, and then a phase 2 would be more permanent, sort of obviously a lot more engineered and a lot more consideration of the longer term plan for that intersection. But either way, we are expecting that in the future, the block that Barber World Foods is on could be redeveloped along with the adjacent areas. But we do know that any improvement to that, any long-term improvement to that crossroads intersection is extremely complicated because of the highway standards and sort of the if they keep the ramps there, the grades for those might need to be revisited significantly, and that might have impacts. So there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle that we have not resolved, and we don't pretend to have resolved, but that what we're committing to is moving forward to continue to study and poke at that so that we can perhaps figure out how to bring all those pieces to fruition so that we can improve this area. That's sort of a long-winded, not exactly probably what you were thinking specifically, but that's our transportation piece of the puzzle right there.
Certainly a tough nut to crack, given the fact that everything goes through one point for the most part there, right? And I guess maybe to follow up on that, this sort of granularity of access, and know that the green ring is an idea, and there's 2 pedestrian bridges that sort of flank the perimeter that actually allow for that flow. And the fact that there's always the challenge with the sort of post-war development, the lack of sidewalks, and especially in the West Hills, that sort of accessibility. Is there anything specifically addressing accessibility and looking at, I know you had mentioned it, Cassie, there was an interest in the community to kind of think about those further neighborhood connections in a more accessible way. Was there any language or any sort of prospect to kind of point that out in the character statement more?
There is, there's some discussion about accessibility in terms of the topography piece. And then also in terms of just more accessible connections between sites and between the areas of the center. But I don't know if that's getting at your question necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just building on it, I think it's a challenge with the topography and the existing conditions, and wondering if the green ring could also play a part in getting you off the streets and accessing nature and getting another sort of another more enjoyable route to come and go through the neighborhood, perhaps, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I think continue on. Leslie had a second part to that question. What tools will be used to avoid gentrification in a market like this as things develop? We always know that's a challenge. You're muted.
Yeah, that's a really tough one as well. So we've focused a lot on residential displacement, and we've considered commercial displacement, but we haven't gone as in depth as perhaps we could in terms of tools for that commercial displacement. Certainly, there are a number of factors, right? Not just this plan and future market changes, but also, just changes to the transportation infrastructure there, right? As well, could be a displacement factor. And so we are working with the community in terms of having them identify ways to support small businesses in the area, and we are hoping that from that work we can work together with them to build tools to support businesses like this one. And certainly Barber World Foods has been tracking this project and very interested in the outcomes and in supporting the outcomes that the community has said they want to see here. But there isn't anything specifically for those small businesses right now in terms of displacement prevention in the plan. Certainly something that could come up later again in the council process, but so far hasn't been super robustly brought up at this juncture. There hasn't been a lot of business input actually in terms of displacement concern outside of the community organizations that we've been working with. And I'll leave it there, but yeah.
Really that kind of landed on that question for you, Leslie. Let's see, Fiona had a question. This project's, I'm gonna just, I guess, introduce it. The project's kind of come across a timeline here, and she says that the 2020 census data has been rolling out recently. Has the team identified any trends or changes in respect to diversity in the community?
And I'm not sure if you guys have looked at that.
Yeah, so we have been preoccupied with some other aspects of the plan to date, but as we finish up with the PSD, we'll want to focus on that and make sure that we can reconcile any of the updated information with the information we had before. So a little bit TBD, Fiona. We are hoping to do that piece as we head into council to have all our information updated, but we haven't done that yet.
Great. This is interesting. I think it touches on one of my questions just about multimodal access. But David, you had a question regarding to ODOT's new blueprint for design, which allows for multimodal design options versus their sort of previous, let's just say, versus their previous design exceptions. Allows you to do something different specifically to in the character of the place. Have you worked with it? And if so, do you see it as helpful given that this is an ODOT facility right here in the mix of ODOT facilities?
I've consulted it a little bit, just looking at, I think what in the architecture and urban design section, there's a bullet about just thinking about response and livability in terms of noise, pollution. So kind of looking at how any advice it gives there. I know that's not multimodal, but that's one of the things I've been kind of struggling with on how to give guidance for building along a freeway. But it's definitely something that I've consulted and trying to weigh that guidance with what community is asking for, and it has been helpful.
Has there been input from the community at the outreach sessions about probably something like for bike access, How do people come and go? And which maybe builds a little bit on another part of the question that I was tracking on in terms of how are you thinking about parking in the district, and what are your other guidelines about how to address that? And will they change as greater transportation systems come on board here?
So in terms of parking, the character statement doesn't directly address the parking, or it's kind of more holistic look at. Yeah, there are the large, and remember, it is a part of the larger guideline framework that does have specific guidelines to talk about parking and how to address that. So it's kind of fitting into that context. So I would say it's leaning on that, but it's also looking at, in terms of not so much parking, but like the connectivity. And then there is a couple of green infrastructure elements of the project plan that are talked about in the character statement, green separating between streets and buildings, right? These helpful elements. But yeah, I don't think we necessarily talk about the parking in the statement.
Yeah.
But definitely ped and bike is a big element.
It's a focus there. Yeah, that makes sense. And addressing, again, the sort of challenges of the verticality of the overall neighborhood. Patty has a question. Are walking routes to school duration?
Yes. The diagrammatic map for the character statement kind of highlights these different community landmarks, and the schools are called out on there. And then we talk a lot about, especially south of Barber, there's this kind of institutional spine along Capitol Highway with Markham Elementary, and there's a mosque, and Jacksonville, not too far, better connections on sites that are in that area. So it is a consideration.
Great. So far we have 2 more questions. And we've got about 10 more minutes, but I'll go with Rachel's question here. She has a statement, basically it says, create better future pedestrian access to Barber Boulevard's block off of Taylor's Ferry and Capitol Highway. So I think it's that moment of greater access and greater connection to Barber Foods off of Taylor's Ferry and Capitol Highway. Yeah.
Yeah. Barber. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say Barber World Foods actually made an appearance in our previous draft, or maybe it's still in this draft. I'm having version control at the moment. But we were advised to take that out, specifically naming that resource or store in the draft, just because of the idea of this changing neighborhood. Maybe it didn't make sense to keep the name in there and reference it specifically. So instead we're focusing on more institutions, but with the idea of that, if those connections are created, it will obviously improve connections to Barber World Foods. I hope that it's not super eloquent, but hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah, I think, Rachel, I'll speak for you. You followed up just in saying that it's a finer grain, a pedestrian scale there that's different, perhaps because of that moment there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw there's one right above that Fiona had.
Yep.
Barber Boulevard get its own character statement. This is, at least in the town center, right now we're doing it. Let me back up. The character statements as we're doing them right now, because they're sort of tagging them on to 2 different plans. Right now, West Portland has an area plan. And so we've taken the opportunity, and it's expanding the design overlay. So we're using that as an opportunity to give it its own character statement. If there's another plan in the works for Barber Boulevard somewhere down the line, there's a possibility it will get, and there's de-overlay, there's a possibility that will happen. Well, remains to be seen.
I know you guys had you wanted to get some feedback on some of your questions. Maybe Erin there's one more question here, maybe we can, and then maybe we can pivot, maybe.
Sure.
Erin, you wrote, love to see the connections to nature represented. Have climate adaptation strategies, or yeah, adaptation strategies, and specifically impact on vulnerable populations been part of the discussions as well. So climate impact and vulnerable populations, right?
Yeah, very much so. This plan has a lot in it, and I wish we could do like more on each element, right? But we've done what we could in terms of what we could touch on at this juncture. Certainly, we have tried to, and with the help of the Planning and Sustainability Commission and some Design Commission comments as well, we've moved towards integrating more elements that are climate resilient, responsive in terms of our zoning code. So we have a couple of pieces in the plan district that specifically talk about reflectivity and solar panels, and we have some urban green features also built in to the proposal. But I think that another piece is that we are continuing to support the partnerships and the collaboration that we have with nonprofit partners and their work in the climate resilience area. So in part, it's putting some things in the code, but in part, it's making sure that some of the actions in the plan are supportive of their ongoing efforts. The other thing in general is just moving towards trying to make this place move away from its auto-centric nature and really bringing in those networks for getting around without cars and encouraging development that is not focused on prioritizing the car element. And so I think sometimes we forget that these major planning and land use moves really do have a very climate resilient supportive component. And so I think, we have some macro stuff and then we have a few micro things. Again, could we do more? Probably, if we had a lot more time to focus on that particular element of it. But certainly we're excited to see, continued suggestions in that regard for finer grain things that we can integrate or suggest or promote with the plan. And so that's my quick answer.
Hey, Joan. Cassie, did you want to, I don't know if you wanted to pull up your question, or did you want to pose some of those questions you had in your slides to the group?
I will, for the sake of time, I'm gonna choose the one that I thought might be most interesting, or that I think is most interesting. And it's something that we struggled with when talking about the future of architecture and urban design character in this area. And just looking, so the question was, what contextual features would you design from auto-dominant character? So just curious, those of you that have worked on projects or even thought about it, what would you look for to respond to in some of these areas or pick up on? Because it's definitely a challenge, the character.
Is this a sort of hand raise thing, David?
Sure.
It is, and there's hi, I'm David McElnay, and I'm on the executive committee UDP. But I have something to offer on relative to that question, and it is two things. One, if everyone who's here wants to give input, the executive committee can consider putting together a paper or a response to your questions enumerated, Cassie, and we've done this in the past, and especially if it's going towards some sort of presentation that you might want to have input from a condensed body such as the urban design panel. Number two, I asked about the ODOT question, and let me expand that and say one thing that's critical in these vehicle dominated spaces to urban design, to all of the design elements you're talking about, green, architectural, public open space, is to get the transportation agencies in the room ASAP, right? Because you're in a triple whammy of state, county, and local roads. I'm guessing, I'm sure. If I drew a big enough circle around it, or they'll all be there. And then consideration of public transit and multimodal on top of that. So just even getting down to the nitty gritty of like, where can I do a curb cut and no one can agree upon it? So having those transportation entities in the room looking forward together in terms of solutions is super critical. I'm speaking in generality because there's too many details to chase down. But obviously that's kind of, I would say maybe philosophically or strategically, how do you bake that into a character statement, or how do you kind of have follow on value from the character statements to make that point about the disparity of entities and the impact of transportation on actually foiling a great deal of things you might want to do because it's cross-departmental.
Thanks, David. And yeah, that is extremely important. And I know the plan itself is has worked a lot with PBOT and ODOT. And there's a lot in the growth strategy, trying to figure out how those pieces, the land use and infrastructure pieces, go together. And the work with the character statement is try to pick up on some of those elements. But it is so hard, like you said. And to answer your question about getting feedback, I mean, it would be great. I just had 3 questions, and if you guys have the time, we have our next design commission session March 3rd. So anytime before then, we could get feedback. That would be wonderful.
Well, as I said, we want to be inclusive. So everybody on this call probably knows someone on the executive committee or multiple people on the executive committee. So we can do emailing in order to draw ideas either to you or to us. We can certainly distill something coming out of the 3 disciplines of planning, landscape architecture, and architecture as a statement from the panel to respond to those if it's helpful. And I think we'd be happy to do that. March 3rd is kind of around the corner.
It is. So if it's not possible, don't worry about it. But I appreciate the offer. Yeah.
But I would put it back to everybody, the question about contextual landmarks, points of interest. A lot of people know that site better than I do. So I'm going to mute and let some.
I don't see any specific questions in here, Patty. Don't underestimate the effect of generous tree and planting in humanizing the auto-dominated environment. Simple and inexpensive. So that struck me as well, like creating, it's a scale element, right? And it's a sort of comfort level, and also heat island at the end of the day, in competition with utilities and all the things that need to happen for sure.
Agreed.
So we are up on the hour, and I just want to make sure that we have a moment to thank you all for sharing this really great work. You know, I know you've been working on it for a couple of years now, and thank you for bringing it out to the community and to the design community and really trying to be inclusive in the process. It's really great. So please follow up if anyone has any design ideas or input that we would like to relay to our friends at BPS. And I would just say have a great day. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.